Thank you very much, and thank you very much for the kind introduction. My name is Joe Nielsen. I'm the CEO for APM Terminals in Latin America, and I've been involved in the transportation sector for 15 years in Europe, United States, and the last couple of years, fortunately, here in Latin America. Now, take a look at this first picture, and tell me what you see. Well, what I see is two things. First, it was a sunny afternoon in APM Terminals in Callao, a beautiful day. The second thing you'll see is there's containers on the right side. There's trucks, there's cars, there's material for the oil industry, and there's material for the mining industry. So this is a booming economy. You will also notice that the infrastructure that we're working on here is not exactly state-of-the-art. We have finger piers, we have a pretty old yard. Fortunately, APM Terminals is investing a lot of money to upgrade this, but I think this is a good picture of what is a general trend in Latin America. Booming cargo, old infrastructure. That's what I'll talk about today. But before we get to the actual presentation, let's just spend a second thinking about what is our role in society as port operators. Give you an example. If you are a chicken farm producer in the southern part of Brazil, and you want to bring your chickens to market, you can put them on a truck and take them to the nearby city. Now, if you're lucky, you sell it all, you go back, you get another truck, maybe you get 2 trucks of chickens, and you take one to the nearby city and one to another city. But what if you could go through APM Terminals in Itajaí and connect to world markets? All of a sudden, the possibilities for you as a chicken producer in southern Brazil are much, much larger. That's what we do. We connect economies. Now, a big part of what we do is containers, as you can see in this picture as well. And it is important to recognize that containers has a significant contribution to society as a whole. The Economist last year had an analysis done that showed that 20 years after introduction of containers to a country, bilateral trade increased by 790%. 790%. Free trade agreements, another very important element in trade, 20 years after introduction of free trade agreements, trade would on average increase 285%. So containerization almost 3 times as impactful as FTAs. That's what we do. That's our business. Now, let's look at some of the key trends that we see in our markets. Firstly, the world is still growing, fortunately. We are out of the crisis. We're in a new normal. It's not growing as fast as it used to, but it's still growing at a hefty 5.9% over the next 4 years, as projected by our good friends from Drewry. The market is consolidating. The shipping lines are consolidating. If these 3 alliances becomes a reality across their networks, that would consolidate 74% of the world's container fleet. So that's a very important element of the future. Latin America, we will outperform the rest of the world. That's nice to hear. 7.2% average growth is expected. But we'll also see the introduction of ever larger vessels. If we just go back the last 5 years, the average size of a vessel coming to Latin America has increased by 50%, 50. And that trend will continue. In general terms, we're not ready. We're not ready for this. If you look at the World Economic Forum's ranking of infrastructure around the world, Mexico, our second largest economy, is number 73. Brazil is in excess of number 100. So we simply do not have the infrastructure to cope with this growth that we expect to see. We have learned that firsthand. One of the major issues we have in our brand new $1 billion terminal in Santos in Brazil is the fact that we cannot take in the big vessels. And we can't take them in because much needed and, by the way, promised work to dredge the channel is now 18 months delayed. So we have a $1 billion terminal ready for business. It's been open for 6 months, and we still can't take the business. Now, that hurts APM terminals, obviously. But you know what? It actually hurts the economy around Santos much more, Sao Paulo, and the big city areas. It's estimated that the loss due to delaying cargo annually to the Brazilian economy around Santos is $700 million a year. So why are we delayed? That's a good question. We'll talk a little bit more about that. Also, if we go behind the ports on the inland side, take the top 5 import-export markets in Latin America. On average, the roads are paved 30% of the time. 30. In China, that number is 55. And Singapore, well, obviously Singapore is 100%. But this is not good enough. So we need to do something about the infrastructure. Now, one of the big trends, as mentioned, is ships, the size of the vessels that will come to Latin America. This is the Santa Claus of Hamburg Süd. It's been in the market already for a couple of years on the East Coast. But today, Hamburg Süd actually has 9,600 TEU, 333-meter-long vessels on the East Coast. I don't think anybody would have thought that to be a realistic opportunity just a couple of years ago. That vessel, by the way, that vessel calls APM terminals in Buenos Aires, where we have 4 mobile harbor cranes to operate that ship. That tells you a lot about the infrastructure that we have as well, but that Latin America as a whole have to service these large ships. On the West Coast, MSC, they have introduced vessels that are 10,000 TEU big. And ultimately, these cascade of tonnage from the main east-west trades will have an impact on ports in Latin America, not only those ports that service these vessels, but moreover those ports that would like to service them. There will be winners and there will be losers. There's about 140 active container ports today in Latin America. We expect that no more than 20 to 25 will realistically be able to take these kind of vessels and have the business to support it. Now, this is not all necessarily a bad thing. Just to give you a little bit of a benchmark. The top 5 import and export markets in Latin America would still only make up the sum of what's handled in Tianjin. That's the 9th largest port in Asia. So we do also have a need to consolidate the business. So what can we do to make sure that we are ready for the future, that we're ready for the big ships? Well, one of the things is, obviously from the public authorities' point of view, there's a couple of things that we would emphasize as being important. In order to attract private capital, in order to attract, more importantly, know-how, we need to facilitate transparency, and we need to facilitate ease of doing business. In regards to the latter, we have seen vast improvements, for instance, in Panama and in the Pacific Alliance. But we still have half of the countries in Latin America ranking below 100 on the World Bank's ease of doing business ranking. Brazil, our largest economy, is number 130. If we seek economic development like we have in Asia, this has to change. For private operators, there's no doubt that capital is available for Latin America. Everybody has tons of money that they want to put into infrastructure. And that's, of course, great. But tons of money is not the solution to everything. You need to have know-how as well. If we benchmark our performance in Latin America to the rest of the world, well, firstly, let's look at what has happened in the world over the last 50-plus years. In 1965, the average productivity in a port was 1.7 tons of cargo per hour. After containerization in the early 70s, that number increased to 30 tons per hour, or 17 times. So a vast improvement in productivity. Containerization brought a vast improvement. Today, in Yokohama, in Japan, we, APM Terminals, do 2,250 tons per hour. That is 1,300 times more than what was the average in 1965. So things are changing. It might take some time, but things are changing for the better. That's Yokohama. And by the way, that port, that terminal, is the most productive terminal in the world. These statistics here are from JOC, Port Productivity 2012. Those show that Yokohama, on average, does 150 berth moves per hour across all vessel types. If you look, those are the top 6 on the top. On the bottom, we have the top 4 in Latin America. I think those numbers speak for themselves. 2.5 times more productive in Yokohama than in our best port in Latin America. And that's not even an APM Terminals port, yet. One day. Now, it is a coincidence, obviously, that out of the top 6 in the world, 4 are from APM Terminals. And actually, if you look further down the list, we also have more on the top 10, but that's a coincidence. So, for the shipping lines, for our customers, what is this going to mean? If we could get to those kind of productivity levels through investment, through know-how, what would that mean? Well, firstly, we have to find a way to make sure that these investments are feasible. That's very, very important. And in some places, that might mean that the handling charge actually goes up. But remember, if you can get 100 or 150 berth moves per hour, your cost to your network as a shipping line, which is crucial these days, especially with the fuel price, that cost will go down tremendously. So there'll be a benefit, but we have to make sure that this becomes a reality. In total, if we could develop, not world-class, not the 150, but just a little bit shy of the top 10 ports in the world, in the main ports in Latin America, we would expect to see a 20% reduction in transportation cost. So think back to the chicken producer in southern Brazil. Now today he actually uses APM terminals, so he's happy. But imagine that he was using one of our competitors' terminals, and we could lower his cost by 20%. He would be able to compete in a much more effective way in Europe, where he's trying to sell his chicken, in Asia, or in the United States. This would benefit all of us. This is how economies grow, through trade and through being competitive. So that's our role. Now, I can't help but do a little bit of marketing today. APM Terminals, we are a global operator. We have 65 ports. We have more than 20,000 colleagues around the world. 5 of those ports are here in Latin America today. As mentioned, Santos just recently opened. And we are building 2 very important new port projects, one in Costa Rica and one in Mexico. The one in Mexico, in Lázaro Cárdenas, that's going to be the most advanced technologically advanced port in Latin America and in North America, so in the Western Hemisphere. It's quite an achievement. The port we're building in Costa Rica, we call it the world's largest reefer port. It's going to have about 1 million containers every year, and a majority of that is exports, bananas, pineapples, from Costa Rica to the rest of the world. And again, think back, if these producers get access to first-class infrastructure that connects them to world markets, and we can help reduce the cost to get to those markets, that's going to matter to the economy of Costa Rica tremendously. Over the 33 years of concession that we have the port in Costa Rica, our total investment amounts to $1 billion. And if we just take the coming period, 2012 to 17, so investments we have made over the last couple of years and investments we will make over the next couple of years, in totality we're looking at $2.5 billion that are being put into our economies here in Latin America. We have an appetite to do more, but capital is not everything. We need to improve our existing operations by transferring know-how, by getting up that list that you saw of the most productive ports in the world. We have to do that. Over the last 2 years, to give you an example, in our port in southern Brazil, the port that connects the chicken farmer to the world, we have, through know-how, no investments, pure know-how, increased productivity by more than 60% on average. So being part of an organization that has 65 ports around the world, 20,000 employees, money to invest, it does matter. So thank you very much. In summary, growth will come. Larger ships are already here and they'll only continue to grow. In general, we're not ready. We're nowhere near ready in Latin America. And investments in infrastructure are needed to make our ports world-class again. Thank you very much.